Hello, and welcome to the South Peninsula Yom HaShoah v'Hagivurah Service of Remembrance. My name is Zach Bodner. As the CEO of the Oshman Family JCC, I am honored to welcome the whole South Peninsula community to this year's gathering. I want to start by thanking our community members who sounded the shofar to call us to remembrance. The sound of the shofar has stirred countless generations of Jews to recognize the divine presence. The shofar marks a fracture in time, a cessation of the everyday. Today, as we do each year, we pause. We halt time in order to remember the Shoah. We do this because the enormity of that tragedy never leaves us. 6 million lives cut short. 6 million Jews who had their time prematurely halted forever. 6 million whose absence continues to leave a hole in the body of the Jewish people to this day. We pause because we refuse to reduce who they were to the fact of their death. They are 6 million individual souls whose value we honor with our memory of time. The theme of this year's Service of Remembrance is Terezin, behind the mask. As you'll learn from today's program, the Terezin concentration camp was where some of European Jewry's most prominent scholars and artists were placed, and where art and music continued to be created even in the face of terror and cruelty. It was also the site of a deception, one that quieted those who might have spoken out in defense of the victims. Today's program was put together through a collaborative effort led by Karen Bergen and the planning committee, who put so much time and thought into creating this event. Thank you, all of you, for your vision and dedication to this important commemoration. And now, I'd like to turn it over to Alana Schechter, a member of the planning committee, to introduce the next portion of the program. Thank you.
I am Ilona Schechter, a member of the planning committee that prepared the Service of Remembrance. We're about to hear from 2 local teens who had the privilege and honor of interviewing survivors. They will introduce themselves. It saddens us this year that we will not see our survivors lighting candles in memory of the 6 million who perished in the Shoah. We will see photographs of the survivors' lives supplied by the survivors. It also gives me great pleasure to introduce Shlomi Kaufman, the Consul General of Israel to the Pacific Northwest, who has very graciously agreed to address us and who will speak following the teens.
A pebble, the color olive, a white feather, and Italian wine. My name is Sarai Steinberg, and this is the story I want to tell you about Alfred Kuhn. Born in Barschfeld, Germany in 1934, Al first encountered anti-Semitism at age 3. His playmate picked up a pebble and threw it at Al. When he told me how much it hurt, how confusion had overcome him, his voice broke. At home, he asked his parents why. Their response, "It's because we're Jewish." Fast forward to Kristallnacht. Al and his family were taken to the county courthouse and kept in its basement for hours. Large, dimly lit, and he told me passionately, painted in the ugliest olive green you can imagine, the verdict arrived. Women and children were allowed to return home, while men were sent to Buchenwald. Being a war veteran, Al's father was released after several months. As for the physical damage, what struck me most was what happened to Al's synagogue. Nazis ransacked the congregation, smashing every window. Wooden benches, which had cushions filled with white goose feathers, were ripped to ensure easier burning. Piling up the cushions, sacred prayer books, and the Torah, Nazis lit a gigantic bonfire. Hot air from the fire caused the feathers to ascend into the sky. The next day, little Al still saw small white feathers raining down. Shortly after, in March 1940, Al and his family were able to leave Germany via ship, train, on a truck traversing the world's deadliest road, then bareback on mules, to the jungles of Bolivia. Here, they would initially work on a farm under primitive conditions. No electricity, running water, or school before moving to the States after 10 years. On their ocean voyage to South America, aboard the Conte Biancamano, it was the first night of Passover. Fleeing religious persecution, the Jews on board were able to conduct a Seder. While they didn't have matzah, the Italian stewards were generous in serving wine, and Al still remembers its taste, his first of freedom. Al and his wife lost 70 family members in the Holocaust. His story is one of both survival and the importance of remembrance. So, I ask that whether it's a pebble, the color olive, a white feather, or Italian wine, you hold on to a piece of Al's story and never forget.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Becker, and I attend Congregation Beth. I had the privilege of interviewing Rosette Bessman. Throughout the Shoah, Rosette, her brothers, and her parents, Jean Fribourg and Yvonne Ulrich, spent time in many different places. Rosette was born in Paris in 1932. While Rosette's father was fighting for France in the war starting in 1940, the rest of the family escaped on a circuitous route to Nîmes. Rosette's family went to Algiers, Morocco, after leaving Europe. However, when her parents felt that North Africa was no longer safe, they tried to get to the United States, but were unsuccessful due to the Pearl Harbor aftermath and the anti-Semitism present within the Roosevelt cabinet. The family then went to Marseille, France, to get visas to Cuba. Since they could no longer depart from Lisbon following the Pearl Harbor attack, they spent some time at a displaced persons camp in Casablanca. Rosette's family eventually made it to Cuba, where they spent 3 years before receiving visas to the United States, where the family finally arrived on April 12, 1945. Throughout their journey, the family experienced anti-Semitism, like when Rosette's brother was kicked out of school because he was Jewish, despite being the best student in his class in Algiers. Additionally, Rosette's family faced many near-death experiences. Once, Rosette's family avoided death only by a matter of minutes when a gas station they had just left was bombed. Obtaining U.S. visas was difficult since Rosette's French mother was accidentally born in Vienna. The German immigration quota to the United States was full, causing the family to wait for 3 years in Cuba before receiving their U.S. visas. The family had to wait in long lines to acquire food and often did not have enough until they reached Cuba. In addition to her experiences during the Shoah, Rosette shared a little bit about her grandmother, Lucy Ach Fribourg, who was brutally murdered in Auschwitz. We are honored to remember Rosette's grandmother today. Finally, I wanted to thank Rosette for sharing her story with me. Through listening to her story, I learned more about determination to survive and bravery, which are lessons that we can all learn from.
When one thinks of the story of Terezin, it is impossible to tell the story without remembering the incredible work of Helga Huskova Veisova. Little Helga was born in Prague in 1929, the same year as Anna Frank. When the Nazis deported her to the Terezin ghetto in 1941 at the age of 15, her father, who knew she was a gifted artist, told his daughter to throw what you see. And that is exactly what she did. For the next 3 years, she was held in what was known as the girls' home in room 24. During her time there, she followed her dad's request and used her gift to chronicle her daily experience in the ghetto and then later in Auschwitz and Freiburg. The diary she used to collect her images survived the war, as did Helga. After the war, Helga was able to fulfill her dream of studying art. She moved back into the house she was deported from Prague, where she lives until this day. The diary that she kept was published as a book in 2013 entitled Helga's Diary, a young girl's account of life in a concentration camp. Today, this book serves as a testimony to the egregious crimes against children in Terezin ghetto, which caused the death of 15,000 of them over the course of the Holocaust. In these days, when anti-Semitism is on the rise globally and violence against Jews are at an all-time high, it is incumbent upon all of us to remember Helga and the 15,000 children in Terezin and 2 million children who perished in the Holocaust, to listen and remember their stories spoken by few remaining survivors. For if we fail to remember, we may allow history to repeat itself. This daily affirmation of remembrance is how we push forward as people, onward and upward. Thank you.
Das Emek Himmel, als du gehst den letzten Weg, Himmel Laie, der verstellt Laie Tag, und wenn doch unser ausgedenkte Schau, es wird der Beug von unser Gott, wir seinen Lohn. Kommen wenn doch unser ausgedenkte Schau, es wird der Beug von unser Gott, wir seinen Lohn.
We're about to hear 2 readers from the Gideon Hausner Jewish Day School and 2 from the South Peninsula Hebrew Day School. They will introduce themselves. These readings were written by Jews during their incarceration in Terezin. Then our 3rd survivor essay, written by a local teen, will be read. This survivor actually survived Terezin, one of only 100 children of 15,000 to do so. Following the report of the interviewer, Rabbi Chaim Koritzinski of Congregation Etz Chayim will chant El Malei Rachamim. Local educators George and Esther Rubin will lead us in the Kaddish of Remembrance. Batya Chazanchuk will play Hatikva. And we'll close with the sounding of the shofars, with thanks to shofar sounders Neil Blecherman, Fred Munich, and Josh Pennington. You are welcome to stand for any part of the service. Thank you to all the participants, the planning committee, and additional supporters of this service, and the co-sponsors of this commemoration. Please stay with us to hear the readers and prayers that follow, and thank you for joining us. God willing, next year we will be together again. Shalom, sei gesund, good health.
Terezin, or Theresienstadt in German, located 60 kilometers away from Prague, was a ghetto established by the Nazis for the Jews of the Czech lands and also Central and Western Europe. It was originally established in the 18th century as a garrison town, and during World War I, it functioned as a military prison. The Nazis invaded this region in 1938, renaming it the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. In late 1941, a ghetto was established in Terezin by the Nazis. Although we refer to it as a ghetto, in reality, it was a concentration camp and a transit camp from which Jews were deported to their death. This fortified town, which was only built to house 7,000 people, at one point held as many as 58,000 Jewish prisoners. More than 150,000 Jews passed through Terezin until its liberation on May 8, 1945. Over 34,000 perished there, and 88,000 were deported by cattle cars to the east to be murdered. For the Nazis, Terezin had an additional purpose. It was to be a great lie, touted to the world as a model ghetto, a good place, a haven for Jews in war-torn Europe. For propaganda purposes, the Nazis twice tried to portray the ghetto in film. The second film was a result of a visit of the Red Cross in June 1944. To create the illusion of normalcy, Terezin underwent what the Nazis called the Great Beautification. To impress the Red Cross, the route was chosen in advance and locations were carefully staged. The film was never shown. Almost all of its participants were sent to Auschwitz and murdered shortly after the filming. One aspect of Terezin is that many of the Jews sent there were prominent in the fields of culture. Painters, artists, musicians, educators, philosophers, and others. Operas were written in Terezin. Artists painted and drew there. Musicians performed jazz and classical music in front of audiences. Hundreds of lectures on all variety of topics were given to eager listeners, and a library was a cherished source of knowledge and escapism. We see an incredible flourishing of culture and artistic life in the ghetto, even in the shadow of hunger, disease, exhaustion, and fear of deportation. Very few photographs exist which portray the actual life of the prisoners in Terezin. One unique source we have is from a group of artists who in the ghetto undertook a secret and dangerous mission to document the true nature of daily life in Terezin. Through their paintings, they portrayed the overcrowded conditions, the hunger, the deprivation, despair, deportations, and the constant presence of brutality and death. Some of these artists paid with their lives. When the Nazis learned of this activity, they were deported eastward to Auschwitz.
My name is Charles Ireland, and this is Farewell to Summer. I should like to write as you do, poets, of spring's end, of love and sunny days, of tender evenings spent in the moonlight, of birds and flowers, of trees and bud. I should like to say farewell, as you, who are free, with a walk in the woods, with a river and fruit. As in times of old, when we were like you are, when I was not, as today, broken and forlorn. I would like to take leave of the summer as you do, in the sun, stop short by my prison gate, to fondle a fading bud for a while. I cannot, for I live behind bars, by his denek or nest, one of the 100 children who survived Terezin.
My name is Gami Shore. To be a matron at home meant to be on a call 24 hours a day, to sleep with the children, to get up at night and wake Rudy, to prevent him from wetting his palate. Half an hour later, Charles for the same reason. To rinse Mike's inflamed eyes, to give a pill to Freddie, to change Tommy's compress. There were many sick children in every room. Here again, the matron had to sit down at the bunk of a restless sleeper and stroke his brow, to prevent him from waking and frightening the others with his cries. During the day, she had to look over the children's cleanliness, their rations, distribute them, get a voucher for shoe repairs, take a child to the doctor, get a hold of some medicine, beg for a release in the bakery, the best medicine for all the numerous styes. In short, care for the children's mental and physical well-being by Irma Losterova, a Czech teacher.
My name is Talia Shuby. I worked in the kitchen, which was always at that time the place to be, which meant working practically in the dungeons, in the cellars, which were equipped with enormous containers, where we were cooking for 5,000 at a time, maybe 10,000. The cooking consisted of soup, sometimes a potato, and sometimes a dumpling. All this had been organized to its highest efficiency. People were standing outside in the line 3 times a day with tickets or a little block of tickets to be clipped. We in the kitchen were standing behind the containers with a ladle and everyone filing past. The very, very old people filing past always said, "Please, miss," from the bottom. This meant that maybe there was a piece of potato or something floating or something down there rather than just liquid. By Zdenka Ehrlich.
My name is Gami Shore. In order to survive, you had to have an imagination. Fantasies about food, or the fantasy that you have about how the outside is if you were inside. You imagine it not only the way it really is, but much stronger than it really is. I was, for instance, a nurse, and I worked at night, and I looked out at night. Seraphin was a town surrounded by walls, a garrison town. So I looked out all the beds where the children were, and out of the window I can look into freedom. And you were imagining things, like how it would be to run around the meadow outside. You knew how it was, but you imagined it even better than it was. And that's how it was with food. Also, talking about it helped, by Bianca Steiner Brown, who also translated the recipes into English.
My name is Charles Ireland. Hunger. The hunger was so enormous that one constantly cooked something that was an unattainable ideal, and maybe somehow it was a certain help to survive it all. By Jaroslav Bodlovsky, on a death march from Schwarzheide to Terezin in 1943.
My name is Ori Gilai. We called it cooking with the mouth. Everybody did it, and people got very upset if they thought you made a dish the wrong way or had the wrong recipe for it. By Susan E. Cerniak-Spatz. My name is Kehillah. I can still see the table in the middle of the room with pencils on it, paintbrushes, colors, and paper. The paper was very poor quality, often waste paper or paper left over from some package. Each child could draw freely according to his imagination and wishes. This was extraordinary. It gave us a different life, another atmosphere. Sometimes she brought various papers and I would make collages. We often painted with watercolors or simply sketched. She often brought rare books and also postcards of works of art, and she had us imitate famous paintings, either with collage or with watercolor. Or she would bring flowers or some other item, some pots or a few wooden shoes. Once she told us to paint each other, or to paint something that was especially important to us. She often gave us specific subjects, assigned themes for us to draw. But she would also tell us to use our free imagination, telling us to just paint the place where you wish you were now, or to paint what you wish for. By Helga Polik.
My name is Talia Shuby. The most famous opera composed in Terezin was Brundibar, a children's opera. This opera by prisoner Hans Krasse tells how a brother and sister need to buy milk for their sick mother. The children and their animal friends earn a few coins by singing, but Brundibar, an evil organ grinder, steals their money. The children chase Brundibar to recover it. Brundibar reminded audiences of Hitler, so after the final victory song, they cheered thunderously at the triumph of good over evil. In recent years, productions have appeared in many countries and some were filmed. Ella Stein Weisberger, who played the cat in the Terezin production of Brundibar, said, "When we sang, we forgot where we were. We forgot hunger, we forgot all the troubles we had to go through. The victory at the end was over Hitler. We sang with such enthusiasm."
For the Nazis, at least, it was a very important sequence because it shows the children's opera Brundibar, which was a Czech children's opera composed before the war in Prague by someone who later became an inmate in Theresienstadt, and it was then first performed in Theresienstadt by the Theresienstadt children. It was one of the most popular theatre performances in the ghetto. I believe it had 52 or 53 showings.
I am Ariel Siegel, and I'll be telling Charles Siegmund's Holocaust experience. Charles was born in 1935 in Scheveningen, Holland. He lived with his parents and 4 siblings. They kept kosher, celebrated Shabbat, and he was a happy child. In 1940, the Nazis invaded Holland. Charles' family decided that he, his sister, and 1 brother would hide in a safe house. They saw their father at daily services. One day, their father was not there. The rest of the family had been deported to a Dutch concentration camp, then to Auschwitz, and gassed upon arrival. Charles and his siblings were sent to an orphanage, then deported to Westerbork. They were scheduled for a subsequent train to Auschwitz, but an epidemic broke out and it was canceled. Meanwhile, they received Honduran passports, which changed their status. In 1944, they were sent to Terezin, Czechoslovakia. Charles described the living situation as cramped, dirty, and unlivable. The meager meals were the same every day. Many died due to the unsanitary conditions. Children, including Charles, were educated by adults conducting underground classes. Within the camp, they maintained Jewish traditions. His brother even had his bar mitzvah. In 1944, the Nazis created a propaganda happy town within the concentration camp for International Red Cross inspectors to observe. the Nazis issued a press release explaining Jews were relaxing while the Nazis were fighting for their country. As the war ended, the Nazis accelerated deporting Jews to death camps, and the Siegmund children were on a transport list. The Russian army liberated Terezin on May 9, 1945, throwing candies to the children. After a year's stay with relatives in Amsterdam, Charles' sister went off to be with Swiss relatives, while he and his brother went to the U.S. to live with their uncle and 6 cousins. He was finally able to live a normal life. Charles currently lives in Israel with his wife Gitta and 3 of their 4 children. Charles expressed to me that when Israel officially became a state, it meant the world to Holocaust survivors. The Jewish people, including me, finally had a place to call home. His words will forever stay with me.
Please rise for the chanting of El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Hamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Shechinam במעלות קידושים ותחורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמות כל אחינו ואחיותינו בני ישראל, אנשים, נשים וטף שנטבחו, שנחרקו, שנשרפו ושנהרגו על קידוש השם. בגן עדן תהיה מנוחתם. אנא בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיך לעולמים. ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם. אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו בשלום. המשכבם ונאמר אמן.
My name is Esther Rubin.
My name is George Rubin. Please stand for the Kaddish of Remembrance if you're able, and join us in the Kaddish of Remembrance. Yitgadal
Auschwitz,
V'yitkadash
Sobibor,
Shmei Rabbah
Warsaw Ghetto,
Be'alma Divera Chirute
Babi Yar,
V'yamlich Malchute
Kishinev,
B'chayechon U'v'yomechon
Mauthausen,
U'v'chaye
Dachau,
Dechol Bet
Vilna,
Yisrael
Majdanek,
Ba'agala U'vizman Kariv
Buchenwald,
Ve'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach Le'alam U'la'almei Almaya. Yitbarach Ve'yishtabach.
Mayentz,
Ve'yitpa'ar Ve'yitromam Ve'yitnaseh.
Terezin,
Ve'yithadar.
Drancy,
Ve'yit'aleh Ve'yithalal.
Bergen-Belsen,
Shmei Dekudesha Barichu.
Ravensbrück,
Le'ela Min Kol Birchata Ve'shirata.
Treblinka,
Tushbechata Ve'nechemata.
Belzec,
Da'amiran Ve'alma.
Volhynia,
Ve'imru Amen. Yehei Shalama Rabba.
Lodz,
Min Shemaya.
Grossrosen,
Ve'chayim Aleinu.
Riga,
Ve'al Kol Yisrael.
Radom,
Ve'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav.
Trauniki,
Hu Ya'aseh Shalom.
Chelmno,
Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael.
Sachsenhausen,
Ve'imru Amen.